everyone, and welcome back to Head to Head, a D&Destiny design podcast. I am Good Game Kitty. You can just call me Kitty.
And you are?
And I'm the creator of Dungeons & Destiny. It's been a week, folks. It's been a week. We'll deal with it. Yeah. I'm Kitty. I created Dungeons & Destiny.
I'm Martin, the lead writer, editor, and chief nitpicker for Dungeons & Destiny.
And I'm Baxter, the founder of the Ishtar Collective.
And today, we're going to be picking up kind of where we left off last, because last time we were joined by My Name is Bife, who helped us fill out the CR ranges for the Devil Splicers specifically, because Siva in general is a whole other nutshell, and the Scorn. And now we're going to be going back to looking at individual monsters, and we kept the Fallen rankings from our first few episodes because we really liked those CR distributions. But we're going to be looking at Vex, who kind of occupy the opposite end of the spectrum from Fallen. Fallen start at CR 0 and they go up to CR 10. That's the average range. And Vex go from CR 6 up to 16. And again, this is the average for the faction. There will always be outliers who are less or greater than these values, but we're looking at the basic monsters, and we are trying to slap them into roughly this range. You ready, folks?
Oh, yeah.
So ready.
All right, so on our monster list here, we have 10 monsters to place by the end of this episode. They are the Cyclops, the Fanatic, the Gatelord, the Goblin, the Gorgon, the Harpy, Hobgoblin, Hydra, Minotaur, and Supplicant. And I thought we could start with Minotaur, because that one is kind of... So in my head, I kind of mechanically have placed Fallen Captain, Vex Minotaur, and Cabal Centurion as, like, the same creature. They are designed to fulfill the same role, but they are in different factions. And that role is kind of the anchor of the faction.
I mean, certainly they parallel each other in the game. They're the shielded, sort of mid-strength support type unit that tends to lead a squad of smaller monsters. So that equivalency is familiar, I would say.
Yeah, I'm okay with that, yeah.
So does that mean, then, that all of those creatures are all elite creatures, or are they not?
Well, it's interesting because I would have probably put a Minotaur down as a major, but I do agree. I see the point that you're making about the parallels with the kind of the functions in other races. I guess, I'm just thinking about, like, for one thing, Minotaurs tend to be bigger and kind of more individual. Like you do sometimes see two captains. You don't very often see. Well, I suppose you do occasionally see two Minotaurs as well.
Yeah, you'll see a couple normal Minotaurs in a largish squad. But you're definitely right that the Minotaur chassis is very popular for higher level Vex, and that it gets much bigger when it's being used by more serious Rex and Axis minds. But for the basic Minotaur, who's nobody, that's not any special unit.
Yeah, okay, I'm persuaded then. I think that's reasonable.
Alright, so if they are an elite, or a major, I mean, either one's fine by me. If they are an elite, what CR are they going to go into?
I mean, at the risk of falling into a rigid structural parallelism, is there a particular reason that, the Fallen Captain is, anchoring the average Fallen CR range at 5? Is there a reason the Minotaur as an elite shouldn't anchor the average Vex CR range at 11?
Well, I suppose that comes down
to
the
10?
Negative. Yeah, because if you're in the 5 to 10 range, then you are a monster who is able to contend with experienced Guardians. Guardians who know how to cast their supers, have probably gone on a couple missions, haven't done anything as grand or extravagant as a raid, but maybe a strike or two, a low-level strike.
I would feel like, given the faction scaling that we discussed before, I think somewhere around the 11 mark would make a lot of sense to me.
All right. So that would make Minotaurs. They're going to actually end up with a huge jump. Because I think right now in testing, they are 6 or 7. But as we've discussed a couple episodes ago now, we're trying to actually spread monsters out across the CR range so that we don't have, 10,000 monsters in the CR 0 to 10 range and 2 in 11 to 16 and 1 in 17 plus.
Yeah. Let it be strong. It's good.
Oh, God, no pressure. So I do kind of like the mechanical narrative that comes of this, because even though that the creatures, like I said at the beginning of this podcast, they're like mechanically the same, you end up in this situation where new guardians, they're dealing with walkers and captains who are these really powerful creatures that are difficult to take down. And as they start leveling up and they start getting better at taking down those units, they come up to the Minotaur and they're like, oh man, that must have been a really tough Vex unit. And then you find out, no, that's actually one of their average units, to be honest. That's not even one of their tough ones. That's an average unit for them. And it's just kind of like, oh, so what's one of their tough ones?
The torch hammering will continue until
morale improves.
Until light level improves.
Yeah, until light level improves, or y'all learn to stop staying so close to each other. So if the Minotaur...
Well, so here's my first thought for this exercise was that we should try and place the low end. And I assume, looking at this list of our typical Vex, mostly typical Vex, that the 2 lowest level monsters here are the Goblin and the Fanatic.
Yeah, I was actually going to suggest Goblin, Fanatic, and Harpy to do next.
Okay.
Well, let's just pick one. Let's pick one.
Goblin.
The Goblin's the most basic, right? So
Goblin is your standard unit. So where's Goblin going?
So, I think it has to go somewhere on CR6, right? Because that's the lowest we are going to go with the Vex.
On average, anyway.
Yeah. And I mean, are they functionally equivalent to a Dreg, or are they functionally equivalent to something more like a Wretch?
I mean, I think Goblins, whatever CR they are, should be minions by virtue of the fact they do appear in numbers.
They appear in very big numbers.
Yeah.
They're always that's going to be the most numerous type of Vex. So my question is, do we just plop them at the bottom of the average range as a CR6 minion?
I think we should, personally. I mean, I think that if we overthink it, then we're going to end up in a situation where the faction scaling doesn't,
Agreed.
Yeah,
Agreed.
Question. Is a Harpy stronger than a Goblin?
I would say
yeah.
Okay, so if a Harpy is stronger than a Goblin, then we can pop Goblin down at CR6 minion. And then where would we put Harpy?
Would it make sense to say that a Harpy... I guess a Harpy could be I was going to say, could it be a CR6 soldier? But...
I think it could.
I guess you do often... You see them in smaller numbers than you do with goblins, generally.
Most of the time. But also...
there are exceptions.
Yeah, I mean, I've been running the Battlegrounds thing a couple times over the last 2 days, the one in the core of Nessus, and I'm thinking in particular of the stage where the shielded wyverns are, and you have to get rid of them with the bombs that show up periodically, and there are little squads of 3 harpies at a time that show up there through the course of that fight. And now I'm also thinking of in the exo challenges on Europa, there are a lot of harpies, and remembering other situations where you're right that in a normal sort of detachment of Vex, you tend to find fewer harpies than goblins, but on occasion harpies show up in harpy gangs, which just lots of harpies. One way or another.
That's true. Yeah,
but I do kind of I like the aesthetics of putting the harpy at CR6 soldiers, so that there's a sense in which they're not too far off from goblins. But the soldier tier distinguishes them as a little bit stronger and thus typically fewer in number.
Because if we put them at a CR7 soldier, then we would be saying 4 of them could take on 2 barons. Which I know that doesn't feel right in terms of the video game, because, you know, the video game gets this fun thing called damage scaling, excuse me, which it can use to make any unit into, you know, it can turn a minion into an ultra, and so on and so forth. But you don't get that in TTRPGs. We have pencil and paper. So if we put them at CR6 soldier, that means weaker than barons, and in groups they would be able to take on baron. Okay, so Harpy is down there, and then Fanatic. Now, Fanatic, as one of our exploding units, actually has a rule for how it gets placed, and that is that it cannot be less than a soldier, and that has to do with how damage and everything is calculated for explosions and stuff. For saving throws, I should say. And especially for exploding units who are going to be on the field for such a short amount of time, if they go as minion, their damage is going to be so low, it is not worth it. It is not worth the effort of rolling them in the initiative turn, and then they'll do like 10 damage.
Then I'm going to go ahead and say they should be CR5 soldiers and squiggle, you know, a little bit out the low end of the Vex average band.
All right. And then the other half of exploding units is that the CR you put them at is, you kind of want to think of that as it could instantly kill a creature of that CR or lower when it does blow up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Does that make sense, Baxter?
Yeah, I think so.
And I mean, I feel okay about that characterization. Like we're saying, a fanatic could insta-kill a level 5 guardian. And if we think, you know, a level 5 guardian is able to cast their super, probably starting to do some missions for the Vanguard, like, you know, has a little experience, but is not especially strong as
not really, no.
guardians go. Like, can imagine, you know, you run into a fanatic for the first time and it gets too close and it pops and you are gone.
Yeah, that was my Vault of Glass experience in a nutshell.
Well, there we go. You know, that settles that.
That's the whole Templar fight. So if we have Harpy, Goblin, and Fanatic down there in the minion and soldier range, what are we doing with Hobgoblin? Because I think that would be, if we're going from sort of bottom to top now, after having placed Minotaur, Hobgoblin, in my head, is the next highest on the list.
Potentially, yeah. I think that makes sense. So definitely stronger than a goblin, but I don't know whether they would be in the minion or the soldier column.
I think they have to be in the soldier column, at least. And I'm almost wondering whether they should potentially be in the elite column. I don't know if I really think so, but I'm saying this because, like we were talking about with the Harpy, hobgoblins appear in smaller numbers. You'll, you know, have one of them to 2 or 3 goblins and a Harpy, or who knows. And, you know, like for there to be a couple of hobgoblins, you are probably talking about a group of at least half a dozen Vex before you start to have more than one hobgoblin, right, at a time.
I mean, that makes sense to me. And snipers typically end up falling into the elite column anyways.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, definitely, you know, we've got the Repeater Shank and the Sniper Vandal in the elite column.
Right, exactly. So I'm wondering if they should be in that column, and if so, how punchy do they get?
I am perfectly okay with putting them above Baron, because I feel like while
so wrong.
It feels wrong. I know. You got that video game instincts in you that the Baron is the mini boss and the Hobgoblin should not be able to kill the Baron.
I know.
Yeah. We gotta step away from that.
Right.
So, like, if you were fighting 4 Harpies, they are CR6, right? And Silent Fang Major is CR5. Already that seems a little weird, right?
Well, I mean, it seems weird, you know, our perspective playing against all of these creatures in the video game for years.
Yeah.
But I mean, if we've accepted narratively the conceit that we're going to permit the factions of monsters to occupy different average difficulty bands, then I think Kitty's point earlier is right, that we have to adjust our perspective and just learn to live with the fact that, like, maybe a hobgoblin is like just a badass that can take out a baron, and remind ourselves that, you know, the hobgoblin's weapon, the line rifle, is believed to literally channel
the
like
sun?
fucking high energy particles from a distant star into a coherent beam.
I was about to say.
Like, that,
but I guess
that's a very high powered energy weapon that could probably fuck up even a fallen Baron. So like, okay, maybe this is not so wild. It's just, it breaks from our experience, but...
So, Baxter, this might also help you a little bit. Just a reminder for viewers, Dungeons & Destiny has 2 measures of CR. We have the individual CR of a monster, which is the classic 5e CR system. Nothing's changed there. The basic gist of it is that if you have a CR1 monster, that means it is a fair fight against 4 players who are all at first level. That's the TLDR of the CR system. And then we have the classification, which is we take that monster and we basically say it is designed to be used in this group of monsters. And you have the Ultra, which is supposed to be, your high-end boss monsters. And you have Majors, which they're basically the same thing as, CR system. 1 Major should be able to take on 4 Guardians that are all at the same level as the Major CR. Elites come in groups of 2, Soldiers come in groups of 4, and Minions come in groups of 8. Roughly. They don't have to actually come in those numbers, but And so what you do is you pick like a CR1 Major is a individual CR1 creature, but a CR1 Elite is actually an individual CR of 1/4. It has an offensive CR of 1/2 and a defensive CR of 1/4, and then because of the way that the CR system averages it all out. So a CR1 Elite, even though it comes in a group of 2, it's, 1/4 of a Major. And when you're looking at a CR4 Ultra, which I think was Saber 2 a CR3 or CR4 Ultra? I forget. I have that sheet closed. Someone...
Saber 2 was a CR4.
CR4 Ultra.
If Saber 2 is a CR4 Ultra, that means it has an individual CR of 7, because Ultras, you have to kind of flip it around a little bit. The CR listed is the minimum level the party should be to be able to take on this monster. That is their minimum viable level. So the Saber 2 is actually a final CR of 7, whereas a CR6 minion has a final CR of 2. So Saber 2 will absolutely decimate a goblin, but when you have 8 goblins in a room versus Saber 2, it's going to go in favor of the goblins.
Which doesn't seem, too far off, even in terms of our video game experience.
Yeah, okay. I mean, as you said, it makes sense when you accept the conceit, which is that we are having these factions at different levels.
Yeah.
And
So if we look at our Vex sheet here, seeing nothing else on this sheet except the Goblin, Harpy, Fanatic, and Minotaur, are we still happy with that displacement or that disparity between these units?
Pretty much.
It seems, I am okay with it. It does seem like there's just a big jump, like there's a big gap between the Goblin and the Minotaur, which is maybe fine. It just seems like it's a big step, but yeah, maybe that's okay.
I mean, I could see Minotaur hopping down 1 CR.
Yeah, and it would be a top level creature to fight in that experienced range.
Yeah, and I mean, especially like we said at the beginning, keeping in mind that there are many variants on the Minotaur, which are not just more difficult, but potentially markedly more difficult than your basic Minotaur.
So then it comes back to Hobgoblin. We had just left off on Hobgoblin. So are we good with putting them in the elite column at the very least?
I feel okay about that.
Yeah, I'm okay with that as well, yeah.
Alright, so if they're going to be in the elite column, maybe CR7? Like, part of me wants to say CR8 because that's like, oh, it's in between. But,
Yeah, I'm also inclined toward 7, though we have this whole band here, and I don't want to end up kind of compressing all of these Vex into the lower reach of this range.
So
because we're shy of the higher numbers.
I share your concern that maybe things are going to be too bunched up towards the top half.
What I actually wanted to do, though, is we'll get these 10 onto the list, and it's going to look bare, and it's going to look bad. But I kind of wanted to start figuring out where we could put in such things such as like variant Minotaurs or variant Cyclops.
Yes.
And basically start coming up with new monsters or digging into the depths of Destiny lore to find that one Cyclops and be like, haha, you're a unit now. So it's gonna look pretty bare, but you're gonna have to bear with me on this
so
one.
Then let's accept that not only is it going to look a little bare because we only have 10 basic Vex to start with right now, but it's not necessarily a problem if we end up sort of feeling like the Vex we do have are a little bit compressed on the low end because they are the low end.
Yeah. I mean, certainly we can come up with, named. Maybe that's not what you're after, but we can certainly come up with named Vex and say, oh well, this one is here, like strike bosses or whatever.
And we got plenty of Vex strike bosses, and we got things that aren't on this list, like the Quantum Cyclops, which is the Cyclops that can detain you. We have a couple of D&Destiny homebrews that are the Siege Hobgoblin and the Siege Minotaur, which they're honestly complete anime fights if you ever fight one of them. The best possible way.
Whatever happened to the Sphinx?
The Sphinx is still around. I'm considering reworking it.
And we have the Wyvern now. That's not even on our list.
Yeah, we can put the Wyvern on here. So yeah, Hobgoblin, CR7 Elite, and then what would be next? Would that be Supplicant? Let's actually talk about Supplicant, because I have something I'd like to run by you folks.
Yeah.
I would like Supplicant to be a CR14 soldier.
I have no strong disagreement with that.
That's a pretty big boom, but I guess we want that in the mix.
I mean, I guess so. That remind me, where do we see supplicants? It's just in raids, right?
Vault of Glass and
Atheon fight.
I'm blanking. Garden of Salvation.
Are they in there?
Yes. They are.
Is that what the ones in the last?
The Polemos fight? I mean, Consecrated Mind fight?
Yeah. Deep cut for our
right there.
for our Infinite Forest listeners.
Yeah. But yeah, so I would like them to actually be a CR14 soldier, because at the level that I would expect a fire team to have to take on Atheon, I know we haven't put Atheon on the CR chart, but at that level, I would expect a supplicant to do a decent amount of damage, if not one-shot those of you who have put very little investment into your health or defenses.
Then that seems fine. And keeping in mind that a supplicant is just a higher level fanatic, then it's really... It is just a matter of deciding how big of a boom you want it to make. So
So then Cyclops.
Yes.
Are they Vex?
Well,
Vex, Cyclops are Vex, yes.
Okay.
Well, can you expand upon that question?
So a Shank is not a Fallen. Or a Shank is not an Elixni.
Right.
A Shank is a construct.
By that same logic, Harpies and Supplicants, I don't know if there's any guarantee they are Vex.
Well, okay. This actually matters. This actually matters a lot.
No, but the thing is, the question is, do they have a juice box?
I believe Harpies have a juice box. We just don't see it.
If we don't see it, then we don't know that it's there. I think Cyclops do have a juice box.
They do. If you want to risk the improbable stomp attack that a Cyclops inexplicably possesses, you can go around behind one and you will see the juice box in the back.
Okay, so
I mean, yeah, I think it's one of these. We had I've had a discussion. I've had so many discussions in my lifetime now that I think about
we gotta hold the podcast. We have to have an existential crisis about the number.
Listen, I feel like the does a harpy have a juice box is a harpy of Vex discourse is just like the is a hot dog a sandwich of Vex classification.
It is totally different. But
hey, hang on. We're gonna have to go back and we're gonna have to edit that out. Martin, I know you're not too active in the D&Destiny server, but they literally get into food wars once a month, and there will be hundreds of people yelling about food and what.
Well, we should let them and then ban all of them. Everyone who participates,
no,
banned.
I'm the one who.
None of them are without sin.
No, I just got booted from D&Destiny.
Oh no!
But
I mean, I think the safest thing is to assume that they are all Vex.
Okay, they're all Vex. So Cyclops, where are we popping this puppy?
I mean,
is it a major? It's a major, right?
It's a pretty. I mean, they're pretty beefy things.
Yeah. They do often appear. I mean, sometimes, I guess not often, appear more than just one at a time, but usually only when you're in like a very large area with a lot of smaller Vex.
So here's my proposal for Cyclops. CR8 major.
Feels okay.
Because I'm imagining their big cannon, and I know even in the video game, you get one shot by that cannon. And I'm thinking about the number of times I've played Gambit and their stupid cannon has sniped me from across the map because I wasn't paying attention to the spawns.
They're stupid, slow moving projectile.
Yeah, it's moving.
It's a humiliating death.
Lazily one-shotting you from ridiculous distance.
I'm imagining that, and I'm imagining just a Vex outpost or the Gatelord, was it Zydron? I think it was. Something like that.
That's the first Gatelord, yeah.
Yeah, having one or two Cyclops there. I love the narrative of the Guardians, peeking their head around the corner and being like, all right, the good news is there's only two of them. Just because the Cyclops with that huge cannon is able to just destroy environments and can possibly even one-shot walkers that rolled really low for their health and stuff like that. They are just going to be an absolute menace to have to deal with. They are slow, and you can outrun them because they ain't got legs. So. And
since this is a tabletop game, really, really creative, dodgy people can try to convince their architect that they can run around behind it and just stab it in the juice box.
Yeah. Right in the juice box. Okay, so they're at CR8 major. Next on the list, I guess, what do you guys want to talk about next? Gatelord, Gorgon, or Hydra? Because those are the three we have left.
I think the Hydra is because Gorgons and Gatelords are both specialized high-level beasties, but the Hydra is sort of the top regular type Vex.
All right, so Hydra. I almost want to do two different kinds of Hydra. I almost want to do like your standard Hydra that would be a large creature or a 2x2 on a D&D 5e grid, 10 feet by 10 feet. And then also maybe an Axis Mind Hydra.
Yes, that's a low-level Ultra.
I don't even know if I'd put it as a low-level Ultra.
Well.
Like, I'm thinking Axis Mind. Well, you thinking Axis Mind as in, like, the Nexus Mind?
No. Just, so let us recall, for those of you who didn't read the entire grimoire and are still a little fuzzy on what exactly an Axis Mind is supposed to be, aside from a way for them to label tougher versions of Vex. Axis Minds are not necessarily individual. They're special instances of a sort of medium to high level Vex Mind that are tasked with the oversight of a whole operational division of the Vex Collective that is working on some sort of shared objective. So they're kind of like overseers for a broad task or category of objective.
Okay.
I was just going to say, Courier was an Axis Mind and had...
Yeah, and any like high-level Vex that ends up getting a name is probably an Axis Mind, if not something even more high-level in some way, but they're not necessarily the biggest
but it's
status.
interesting because I think like Atheon was an Axis Mind, right?
I don't remember if he was.
There's definitely certain minds. I guess my point was like I totally see your point that you might have Hydras. You might have two kinds of Hydras: the regular Hydras and the Axis Mind Hydras. But if we're talking about Axis Minds, actually, you don't have to be a Hydra or in a Hydra shell to be an Axis Mind.
No, you
definitely not.
An Axis Mind is more like a rank maybe you could argue there's more.
I mean,
So that'd be
I think
Axis Hydra, Axis Minotaur, and Axis Hobgoblin?
Well, remember the strike? Which strike? Was it the strike that everybody farmed for Imago Loop in D1 that had an Axis Harpy?
Mm-hmm. I almost feel as though, like, yeah, you could say, well, an Axis Harpy is this and an Axis Hydra is this, but I actually don't think there's necessarily an association. Like, these individual Vex were varying power levels, and they were also Axis minds, you know?
That's true. And in principle, you're correct. But I want to draw attention to a parallel situation that we've already gone through with the Fallen, where we have Baron, Archon, Prime Servitor, and Kel in the rankings as just generic stat blocks, even though whenever we encounter any of those kinds of monsters in the game, they're always named individuals. But we wanted architects to have like a starting point for each of those high-level creatures, so we gave them these generic ones, and they could amp up the stat block if they want to make a particular Kel scarier, but at least there's a place to start if an architect wants to put a monster like that somewhere in a campaign. So I think in a similar vein, we could have, a generic Axis Hydra, Axis Minotaur, whatever, without that stepping on the toes of also having particular Axis Vex like Brachion or other strike bosses, raid bosses. Okay, I don't think they get in each other's way. Is what I'm trying to say.
Okay, makes sense.
So back to the normal Hydras, though.
Back to normal Hydras. Let's get normal Hydras on the block here.
If we're going to have a normal Hydra and an Axis Hydra, does that affect the decision about where the normal Hydra goes in terms of whether it's a major or not a major?
Well, yeah. If we wanted Axis Hydra to be kind of similar, as you're saying, in the same vein as do you want Axis Hydra to be a major or an ultra? Because I feel like Hydra should be a step down from wherever Axis Hydra is.
I mean, I feel as though all Axis minds should be ultras. Like, they don't necessarily have to be high CR level ultras, but every Axis mind is unique in the Destiny universe. They are like in charge of a group of Vex.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It logically makes sense in my head, but I could be persuaded. But I think Ultra makes sense to me.
I mean, my persuasion is that a major is still a single creature.
Yeah.
We have Archon and Prime Servitor in the major column for the Fallen, and those are likewise always unique individual leadership characters.
But to me, an Axis mind is more like a Kel than
isn't there supposed to be just like a limited number of them too?
No. Okay. No, I mean, there's probably a non-infinite number of task domains that the Vex Collective needs to have Axis minds for, but I don't imagine there's any real reason they couldn't have an unlimited number of them as necessary.
I think that as well with the Fallen, we know that there are limited numbers of Fallen.
Yes.
With the Vex, we have no idea how many Vex there are in the universe. So they could, quite legitimately, 1,000 Axis minds could show up all at once. I mean,
oh my god, that would
they could.
There's
no reason.
It's hard enough to get Guardians to coordinate for one Axis mind, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, what
the
about...
The day before I retire from strike duty and 1,000 Axis minds spawn.
So, Hydra, basic Hydra, is it a major or an elite? Pick one.
I could see it in either column, even if the Axis Hydra is a small ultra of some sort.
Right. Well, pick one.
Let's say major, because you usually only see one at a time.
Okay. All right, so if we're putting in the major column, so my suggestion is then going to be either CR11 major or CR13 major.
That's interesting. Why not 12?
Yeah, what's wrong with 12, Kitty? What do you got against 12?
So CR11 major would make the Hydra a good boss for mid-level campaigns. That might be something you could spend a story arc building up to try to defeat. Whereas if you put it at CR 13, it becomes a good mid-tier boss for a high-level campaign, where Guardians have just started to hit the higher levels of the experience tier, or they've broken into that CR 11 range, and that would generally be one of the smaller bosses you would fight on your way up to a bigger boss, or to get information on a bigger boss.
I think either makes sense to me personally.
Yeah, I kind of like both of those characterizations, honestly.
Right.
Is there a feasible CR range in the Ultra column where we could put the Axis Hydra such that it would be appropriate as that final boss for the mid-level campaign?
Alright, so a final boss for a mid-level campaign will probably end up being a CR 9 or a CR 10 Ultra.
And to be clear, I mean, so that it fills the role you just articulated for the Hydra at CR 11 Major.
Okay, so CR 11 Major, and alright, this is where it comes down to, I try to keep things as simple as possible so we don't spend, 90 minutes just talking about mechanics and math and how, this game design works here. So when there are Majors and Ultras are basically mini bosses and bosses. But if the party is low enough level, a Major can turn into a final boss. It essentially ends up fulfilling the role of an Ultra. So at CR 11 Major, that Hydra can still be a good final boss for a mid-tier campaign. Someone, a party that is adventuring between 5th level and 10th level. But if you wanted something that is designed to be a boss for that CR range, then you would do an Ultra at somewhere between 8, 9, and 10.
I mean, is there a reason not to put Axis Hydra in there?
No, there's no reason not to at all. It's up to you guys at this point. I've got no particular horse in that race. I mostly just want to get these down here because then I'm going to know exactly what the boss stats are going to be for our next module, so.
I mean, Baxter, what do you think? Because I kind of like the idea of the generic Axis Hydra block being suitable for this mid-tier campaign boss, like Kitty's been describing, and then meanwhile the regular Hydra at, I guess it would be CR 13 Major, is a good mini boss for a higher level campaign. And I kind of even internally feel a little like it's a little counterintuitive for the regular Hydra to be up however many CR levels higher than the Axis Hydra, but the Ultra factor, I feel like, is the hand waving that makes that actually make sense.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, when you put it like that, it looks a bit weird to me looking at this.
It does look weird on the chart, I'll give you that.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely, when you compare it to the Fallen, I definitely feel as though we don't have a similar...
We do. Saber 2 is a CR4 Ultra. Heavy Shank is a CR6 Elite.
Oh, yes, I didn't notice that, yeah. Okay, well, I guess in that case, if there's already a precedent, I mean, this takes that precedent and it, stretches it even further.
Stretches it a little, you're right.
Here's a concept. Okay. So, CR9 Axis Harpy, CR12 Axis Hobgoblin, CR15 Axis Hydra.
I feel like this is somehow you just did the escalating Vince McMahon excitement meme.
Yeah.
It's just, so we don't...
Yeah, that's cool. I like that.
I think that's a great idea.
Do it.
Yeah.
It's done. We're here hemming and hawing. Kitty's just placing 3 Vex in the span of 5 seconds.
Bam.
But we should have Axis Minotaur on there as well, though, because Axis Minotaur is actually much more common. There's only one Axis Harpy and one Axis Hobgoblin that we know of.
Yeah.
So what if we bump up Axis Harpy and put Axis Minotaur where it is? Unless we are happy with Axis Harpy there and want Axis Minotaur to be an even smaller Ultra.
What if we bumped Axis Harpy down?
Yeah, is that what you meant? Bump it down to CR7 or something?
No, I meant solely on the basis of the fact we get a lot more Minotaur variants and have only seen the one Axis Harpy, but that's pretty arbitrary. It doesn't actually inherently mean anything about their relative strength.
I think that makes sense.
And then we can do
that.
And then, now they're nice and spaced out.
Yeah, I was going to say that has a satisfying distribution now.
So now we have Axis Minotaur at CR9 Ultra. These are all Ultras. And then there's the Axis Harpy at CR11. There's the Axis Hobgoblin at CR13. And Axis Hydra at CR15. All right. And we also have Hydra as a major CR13, which means I think we're on to Gatelord, but we could also do Wyvern, because I quick slapped that in the list too.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel pretty strongly about them being elites, because their whole function is to shield other Vex around them, so they show up with other Vex.
Yeah.
And they are meant to help fill in that space. Also legs from here to the Pyramidion. Anyways, so Wyvern, how do you guys feel about like CR12 elite? Like, are they better than Minotaurs or lower than Minotaurs?
At least they are indisputably better than Minotaurs.
They get bumped off the map enough.
Those goddamn little tracking void.
Oh, the stars.
Cuisinart projectiles.
Yeah.
Those things will tear you up.
I had to do.
And then they stomp on you. Get out of here. They're definitely better than Minotaurs.
They're definitely better than Minotaurs. Well, how much better do we want them to be? Because we could put them all the way up at CR16 Elite.
I don't know if I would go that far, but
at least 12. But if we want to move them up for distribution reasons, I feel like they can certainly handle it.
Okay, we'll leave them at 12 for now, even though my heart is screaming something about 14 at this point. But I think that's.
What if we just jump our own shark and make an Axis Wyvern?
Oh my god, you monster.
We could! Oh my god, and what would an Axis Wyvern even do, though? What if it... Okay, so it's a really basic concept of the Axis Wyvern is just able to generate immunity shields for creatures around it, and you have to stun the Axis Wyvern to be able to damage any Vex around it at all.
Or it can detain you.
A detainment, and then stomp you.
And then stomp on you. And also
play.
It's like 4 stories tall. So
an Axis Wyvern
the
size of a Gatelord that's come flying at you. It can do orbital strikes at that height.
It can curb stomp a tank.
Flips a spider tank on its back.
Listen, it's a Gundam.
It is. At that point, it's a Gundam.
So I guess a Gatelord is pretty much already a Gundam.
We'll have to come back to Axis Wyvern, because now I'm thinking about it. But, okay. So then, speaking of Gatelord, let's get Gatelord slapped on here. And
so here's a question totally on the lore side that bears on where we place Gatelord. I do not remember offhand whether we know if Gatelords are always Axis mines, and I don't think so either. But I'm not sure.
I mean,
isn't Brachion the Axis mind of Gatelords? Like, isn't that its function? The gate network, and it runs it, and the Gatelords basically guard specific gates.
I don't think so, but I'm not sure.
So Vex Gatelords are Ultra Minotaurs, responsible for keeping Vex realms locked out of time.
Right. So they're like managers for the Gate Network and Vex space-time access.
Okay.
According to Destinypedia, Brachion is the Axis mind of the Pyramidion.
Yeah, which is where it all converges.
Well,
isn't it?
The Pyramidion is not just like a transit hub for the Gate Network. And I don't know how complete our picture of what the Pyramidion is for ever actually was. But I think it was a multifunctional installation.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know. I wasn't under the impression that the Pyramidion was vital to the functioning of the Vex network, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's connected to the Gate Network, certainly. And it is like a junction for a bunch of Vex pathways. But it's definitely not like Gate Network, Grand Central, or anything like that.
So, looking around here, I actually kind of think I want to put Gatelord in the major column.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mostly, they're kind of the equivalent of ogres. Or I would say abominations, really big ogres.
Yeah, and especially in D2. In D1, you know, Zydron was like at least supposed to be a proper Ultra-style boss, and you only, other than that, fought. The reprised Gatelord in Prison of Elders.
Yeah, it was.
But in D2, Gatelords are friggin' all over the
They're all over
place.
the place. So
you can find Gatelords in a public event. They're not such a big deal.
So, Gatelord, stronger or weaker than a basic Hydra unit?
I think stronger, but
yeah,
I would be convinced otherwise.
Well, no, I would say even if it's just one level, I think it would make sense for them to be stronger.
Yeah,
like I know that, like as you
so
say, in Destiny 2, you can see them in public events, but still, I think the appearance of a Gatelord is much rarer than the appearance of a Hydra. And
definitely,
they're supposed to be more of a big deal. That's my impression, anyway.
Agree. I mean, they are huge. And
Yeah.
it's not their fault that a fire team with falling guillotines can take them down in a fraction of a second.
That's
not really a reflection on them.
I kind of want to bump Hydra down to 11 then, because I kind of want Gatelord to occupy that 13 slot.
Okay.
So if that's Gatelord, last on our list here is going to be the Gorgon. Now, I understand that these creatures kind of have a gimmick with them. They're basically the Death Singers of the Vex. They also can only function within the Vault of Glass.
Right.
So we have to think more in terms of their defenses, and we just, their offensive capability is going to be kind of a given. But think of their CR in terms of what level a fire team would need to be at to be able to take down a Gorgon before it can do its whole "you're dead" thing.
Pretty high, TBH.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of thinking.
Their whole shtick is they soak the damage, right?
Oh, yeah. It takes a lot.
And I remember in the Age of Triumph days when Vault of Glass got brought up to max light and we were running it again, the question was how many of us would go in as Celestial Nighthawk gunslingers to take out Gorgons.
Yeah.
And it was usually at least 3 to have a chance at knocking them out.
So, with that in mind, I kind of want to put them at maybe 20 or 21 in the major column.
What would it be too perverse to put them in a lower column at a very high level?
So when you put them into elite and stuff like that, their defenses are going to be really paper thin.
Okay, so they have to be majors just for the sake of damage soak.
Yeah.
Right, well, then I'll take your word for it, and at that point, their number becomes kind of uncoupled from their class.
Yeah, it's very...
They're weird.
They're weird.
I guess I don't understand exactly how... Is this presuming that you would have a Vault of Glass scenario that you were playing in Dungeons and Destiny?
Basically, yeah. And we get a lot of... Vault of Glass and King's Fall are like the #1 requested raid contents to make.
Okay.
So if we were to put them at, like, let's say CR 18 Elite, that means their final CR is going to come out to be a 13, and defensively, their final CR will come up to be a 9, which means a 9th level Guardian will be able to take them out.
And that doesn't feel right.
Yeah. But if you leave them in the major column, then the offensive CR and the defensive CR are going to end up equaling each other. That's how they average to that number.
And I guess even if they appear in, like 6 of them or something in the Gorgon's maze.
You only ever fight one of them at a time.
But yeah, you only deal with one at a time.
And if 2 of them show up, you're screwed. I'm sorry, that's start over. So these are not elites. You cannot take on 2 at a time.
Good point. Majors they are.
So then it's a matter of picking their number. So 20, 21, either or?
Yeah, I mean, if that's the ballpark, I don't have much reason to say one over the other.
All right, I'm going to slap them on CR20 Major. And we'll get those in testing and we'll see how it goes. Because that's the other thing about this. We can sit here and we can debate for hours on end about the CRs of these monsters. And then we're going to go throw them into testing and we're going to get a bunch of feedback that's inevitably going to have to change half of the stuff that's here. Because that's just how...
Gorgon's OP.
Gorgon's OP, please nerf. Should have seen some of the Death Singer testing we did. It was wild. But I think at this point is where we're going to have to wrap this up. We got through a lot, and we ended up with 15 Vex on the board. With that then, I'll bid everyone adieu, and thank you for joining us today. Dungeons & Destiny is published under the Open Game License version 1.0a. It is a not-for-profit labor of love produced solely for entertainment purposes that contains works inspired by Bungie's video games Destiny and Destiny 2. You can find out more about the project, and you can help support the project by visiting DN, that's a lowercase letter n, so DNDestinyProject.com. Bungie, Destiny, and/or related products referenced herein are either trademarks or registered trademarks of Bungie Inc. or its suppliers. Dungeons & Destiny, and by extension Velvet Fang, is in no way affiliated with Bungie Inc. or its suppliers. Also, go check out the Ishtar Collective, and go say hi to Baxter and his crew. They work really hard to categorize and collect all the files and lore from the game so that we can have podcasts like these debating which monsters are good enough to beat you up. Remember to make good choices and try not to die.